Hello and welcome back to NoBS. Today we turn to talking about a story and a very interesting narrative that most people just aren't talking about, especially the mainstream media. They claim to care about a certain group of people and them dying, and they try to blow up their stories that happen into these big race wars, but they also tend to ignore bigger stories having more people dying in a very specific place. Today we're talking about Chicago. Here's an alert from Breaking 911. It says at least 72 people shot, 9 fatally so far this weekend in Chicago, says the Sun Times. And this is the kind of thing that very few people are going to talk about, very few people are mentioning, especially the mainstream media, the CNNs, the MSNBC. They act like they care. They reported on, George Floyd in Minneapolis. They reported on Rashard Brooks in Atlanta. That stuff, no one heard the end of that. They're still reporting on that. But no one is talking about Chicago, where many more people are getting hurt and dying. This number actually, I think, goes up when you go to the story here. This is from Chicago Sun-Times. Now it's 102 shot, 14 dead on Father's Day weekend. Now, this is tragic. This is really sad. And I want to take this seriously. I'm not trying to say this to gloat or throw it in people's faces. It's just to point it out and say, hey, why isn't anyone talking about this? Why do we hear so much about Black Lives Matter and they want to save black people, but here's a bunch of black people getting shot? Like, this is a black area. This is South Chicago. This is typically, a number of these people involved are going to be black. I can't say to all of them. I don't think it's 100%, or I'm not even sure what the range is, but it's definitely related. It's definitely something to be worried about if BLM really meant what they said. Like, if you really cared about Black Lives Matter, why aren't we talking about this? Well, that's for a number of reasons. First of all, we know that their goal isn't actually to help or save black people. Like, they're not going after the big fish. This would be something like a big fish. This would be a situation that if they actually cared about this group, they would be going after this and saying, hey, let's stop this stuff happening. Let's get something to do here. Like, how do we fix Chicago? Let's look at this problem and fix it. But no, instead, they're focusing on other stories, like we mentioned, the Minneapolis story and the Atlanta story. So what's different there? What's making those stories pop up to them? Well, basically, we know there's different ingredients. For example, there are people that are dying from cops. The cops tend to be white. The person dying is black, and they turn that into a race war. So the real goal then is BLM isn't really about stopping and saving black lives, because they're not really going after the bigger problems. They're going after smaller ones. And that's because their real goal is race baiting. They really want to go after white people and attack us and act like cops are killing everyone willy-nilly when they're clearly not. Like, we know that the cops are actually the ones trying to protect us, trying to save lives, trying to bring law and order to the country, arrest criminals, get people safely to their work and their home and their school. And that's what this story proves. And we already can tell that it's just totally biased and messed up. Chicago saw its highest number of gun violence victims in a single weekend this year, with 102 people shot across the city from Friday evening to Monday morning. 14 of them fatally. 5 of those killed were minors. So we got kids getting killed too. The latest child fatality happened early Monday in Austin on the west side. 2 boys, 15 and 16, were walking in an alley at 12:18 a.m. on the 4700 block west of Superior Street when someone fired at them, possibly from a gray sedan, according to Chicago police. The 15-year-old was shot in his leg, chest, and abdomen. This 16-year-old was shot. A 13-year-old girl was killed. Others were wounded in Austin. A girl was inside her home at 8:30 when the shots were fired. She was struck in the neck. This is all shootings. This is all big, bad shootings, like really dangerous, really scary stuff. Like I said, they don't really mention the race, which I think is kind of interesting. I don't think it necessarily matters, but typically that's the first thing they mention. They would be like, hey, this black person died from a white cop. Like, that's how they usually frame these stories. But in this case, it's different. In this case, we're seeing how they're biased and how they report things differently in different situations. So why aren't they labeling the races here? I don't think it matters. Like we said, it's kids dying. That's tragic. It's really sad. But the toddler, as K. James, definitely sounds like it might be not a white person. It might be a minority. And then these other people, teenage boys, Sean Francis, definitely doesn't sound like, we could guess where these races are falling. And that's why they're not mentioning them. We're not mentioning there's no race baiting when Toby Bones kills another black person, like black on black. That's the problem here. That's why this story doesn't take off is we're in a black neighborhood, we're in black kind of area, and there's nothing wrong with that. We're not against those people. We're not racist towards them. Like we want to help them, and that's why we're bringing this to light. We want to say, "Hey, this is your problem area. This is something that needs to be addressed. You guys claim to care about this group of people. Well, let's point out the actual problems. Like police brutality isn't the real issue. The real issue is this rampant violence in the city, these people getting these kinds of weapons and going after each other, crime spreading. Obviously they're not having proper parenting, they're not being raised right in the happy households. Like these aren't the actions of people that were properly raised. I don't know what else to say. It's like this is really bad. A lot of people were shot in Chicago, 100 people, and no one's talking about it. I mean, where's the story? Where is the outrage? Why? I thought we cared about black people. I don't get it. Back to Twitter, we have some more comments on this. I remember reading years ago about a weekend full of shootings in Chicago, appalled and wondering why it wasn't talked about all over the country. Flash forward to today, and it's just another weekend in Chicago. How sad. Okay. And this is another point to bring up. This has been happening for years. And the problem, too, is this is a Democrat run city. We need to remember that and know that they've had Democratic leadership for many, many years. And on top of that, a lot of corruption in Chicago politics. Chicago's notoriously been run and had these kinds of mafia affiliations, just crooked dealings, corruption. The governor there in that state has had trouble with the law too. Mayors have had to be ousted. And it's all Democrats. It's a Democrat run city and state. I'm actually from the southern part of that state, not near Chicago. And there are good people there too. Like Illinois isn't the lost state. It's not the worst in the world. Chicago can actually be a fine city. Like it used to be a lot better, but there's just these really bad, dangerous parts that throw the whole thing off. I mean, it can have these nice suburbs and you can have good parts of town. But when you're that close to South Chicago, even if it's 30 minutes or an hour away, you're just kind of running with the devil almost. You're near this bad area and it's just not good for the whole city. And yeah, it goes back to Democratic leadership, liberals running their town into the ground. And another part of that is that no one wants to talk about this crime and they don't want to bring up black on black violence because that's supposedly racist. That's offensive to point out, them doing something bad. Really, in the liberal narrative, they want to say black people don't do bad things. They don't even get punished or kind of properly scolded when they commit crimes. Like in these cases out of Minneapolis and Atlanta, the guys were committing lots of crimes and doing bad things like resisting arrest, but that's encouraged. That's not held accountable. And that's another part of the problem. I mean, if your community and your group isn't holding people accountable and it's letting them do horrible things, they're just going to keep getting worse. I mean, they're not going to get better. They're not going to learn that this is wrong. This is not how you should act. And that's why we're getting this kind of bad situation. It says, yep, but apparently these lives don't matter enough to cause action. Been happening for years and years, but no outcry, no action from the leaders of the cities. The hypocrisy is flat disgusting. Typical Chicago, the cities seem nice. As long as the shooters were wearing masks and respectable social distancing guidelines, this is okay, right? So that's a kind of joke. And this is talking about how the cities are bad. And yeah, this brings up another point where there's this thing they call white flight that kind of happened in the past. And it's happening again now in a lot of ways. Like basically, there's so much crime in the cities that a lot of people move out and move to suburbs and create new communities, like smaller communities, and they don't want the city life anymore. The city life used to be better. It used to be good. It could have been great. But now there's all this crime in these ghettos and the cops are trying their best, but then when the media and the celebrities all support this criminal activity too, and they try to look the other way, and they also kind of tie the cops' hands behind their backs, don't let them do their work. Well, it causes this stuff to go worse and worse. And then, yeah, people leave the cities, then people leave. And that's the reason. They don't just leave because they're racist. Like people try to say stuff like that is racist, like setting up your own suburbs and moving to the suburb is racist because you have to have all these people there. Like, why are you living in your own area? Oh my God. But really, it's just, that's all justified. It's like they're leaving because there's crime and there's bad people and they're trying to have a safe place. So why would they bring more of that crime to their new area? I'm not saying obviously no whole race, like no whole group, they're not all criminals, but it's just, it all makes sense and it's not racism that's the cause. My cousin is a sergeant and he's tired of everything going on. No days off until further notice also. It's going to get worse. Cops are all working overtime. That's not good. Thank God they're there, though. I mean, they're trying their best. And yet they have the highest police funding and some of the most ruthless cops. Almost like there's a correlation here. Not sure what that means. Trying to blame the cops. Oh, it's the cops' fault. There's more cops. Like, well, I don't get it. Third world city, that's another reference to just going downhill, like totally ruining the city. Doesn't seem to work too well when leaders are elected based on sensationalism. That's probably why they keep the Democrats around. Oh man, that's great news considering it's Chicago. Usually it's a lot worse. Progress. So yeah, this is another joke. The whole city could kill itself, and BLM would be like, we're not concerned with that. Yeah, and that's the greater point. We're talking about BLM and just the pro Black Lives Matter people, and they're just quiet on this. If you don't hear them talking about Chicago, you know that they're not really caring about Black Lives Matter. These people dying, these people getting shot, this is happening every day. We're talking about 100 people shot, over a dozen fatally killed, and it's just really sad. I don't want to be a Debbie Downer either. I'm not trying to throw this in anyone's face, but I think it's worth pointing out, and it's worth thinking for a minute why no one's talking about this. And I think we all know. That about wraps things up. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Make sure you comment your thoughts on everything below. Also hit that like button, and until next time, you guys have a great day.